It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hola a todos y bienvenidos a un nuevo episodio de Pure Performance. Mi nombre es Brian Wilson y como siempre me acompaña mi coanfitrión Andy Grabner. For English, press 1. Hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of Pure Performance. My name is Brian Wilson and as always, I am joined by my co-host Andy Grabner. Hola Andy.
Oh, hola Brian. I'm completely amazed. So did you, how many practice sessions with Duolingo or whatever app you use have you taken?
That was just Google Translate and probably about 2 weeks now. About 15 minutes. I just kept saying it over and over to make sure I can get it.
So, but it means that you pressed 1, so we're in English now. If I press 2, we're back in Espanol?
Sí, pero el episodio muy short.
So I'm still very happy that we started in Spanish. Hopefully we didn't lose a lot of people that were thinking they have clicked on the wrong link.
I'm listening in America. I want English.
Exactly. But now the question is, probably everybody's asking, what is wrong with those? Are they local or why are they speaking in Spanish? Do you think it has anything to do with our guest today?
I can't. There can be no reason it has to do. I don't understand the connection you would be making there, Andy.
Yeah, no?
No, what? I don't think so. I was just feeling feisty, so.
Okay, good. Well then, thank you for listening in. That was the show. It was a little shorter than expected. But,
I told you, we short.
Exactly. Okay, now, let's go to business. Leandro.
Yes.
Hola, amigos.
Hola.
Yeah.
Hola.
Very happy to be here. Hola, indeed. And yes, very local here. And very pleased, very happy to be joining. Hola a todos en español. And hello to everyone that is hearing in English. Let's keep it pressed in 1 for English for now. But later we can say adios or some other goofy things and have some more fun.
Pero creo es tu primera vez en Pure Performance, ¿correcto?
Sí.
So it's the first time for you in Pure Performance, hopefully not the last. I didn't practice this. So
and we didn't say, you just said Leandro. So let's say who Leandro is. Like Leandro Melendez, right? Señor Performo. Because people still like Leandro. Who the heck is this guy?
Who is that? Yeah,
Leo? Is this Leandro DiCaprio?
That's something that I have still to go like, I am Iron Man. No, I'm Senor Performo. And because believe it or not, at the beginning, some people did not link this face and name with Senor Performo. So I had some conferences where I was near the person that I was tweeting to and like, you're Senor Performo? That's also why I have the mustache and everything that makes more recognizable.
It's good that you mentioned and pointed your face while recording a podcast because nobody will see it. But we took a picture early on. We'll use it on social media. But fair point. Can you quickly introduce yourself for those folks that have kind of followed what we've been doing over the years and still haven't stumbled across your name?
Well, as we mentioned, I am Leandro Melendez, also known in the internet and some testing conferences and videos as Senor Performo. I am an IT engineer, a performance tester, have been for the last 20 years, a little bit over that. I like to blog about testing, performance, IT. I have a blog. I collaborate with the PerfBytes team with PerfBytes en Español. That's why you were listening to so much Español. Sí, muy bueno. And as well, I have a couple of YouTube channels where I generate content about performance testing and in English and in Spanish as well. I do some conferences, some talks here and there, and some other things that I am going to be introducing soon.
Exactly. Yeah. And we want to make sure that we definitely post the links to our summary because I know we have a lot of listeners that probably prefer maybe Spanish as it is their first language. So that's great to know that, Leandro, you are providing content for performance engineers in Spanish. So very much appreciated that you contribute to the community, like we all do when you do it in Spanish.
And I remember now, this is not the first time Leandro's been on Pure Performance, because in Perform, the last Perform we had, he co-hosted a few episodes in Espanol.
That's true.
That was our first Pure Performance Espanol.
Very
and
good.
Leandro, obviously, we know each other from PerfBytes as well. I used to do Ask PerfBytes, and you were a guest of mine many times, so always appreciated that. So, what brings you? Why do we have you on the show today? Even like, what the heck?
Well,
why are we talking? Why are we talking to you? Aren't you a competitor or something? No, there's no competition in performance.
I know. No, I don't think so. Well, I have some news and some things that I have been working on for some years now, and I am super excited to come and try to talk about and get some interest around a book. I wrote a book about performance testing, specifically load testing, and I depending on my publisher, how fast he gets to work that out, it's already ready to be on your favorite.
On the New York Times bestseller list, number 1.
I really hope so. No, on the Testing Times bestseller list, hopefully. I don't know. It'll be on Amazon. So we are planning to put it in the Amazon platform pretty soon. We will do pre-orders, and we're going to be selling the book titled The Hitchhiking Guide to Load Testing Projects, which is a fun guide, a fun way of explaining all the topics, all the steps, all the levels, if I may I say, on how you should do a load testing project.
Awesome. And so at the time of this release, it may or may not be up there, but if not, I guess people should just keep checking on Amazon, but also I imagine there'll be an announcement on the PerfBytes website. So check that, perfbytes.com. They'll make an announcement when that's going to be up there. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for being on the show. It's twice now already.
Thank you very much.
Exactly. No, in all seriousness, so Leandro, I'm not sure, was very pleased when you sent me your initial draft and asked for feedback. Was happy to contribute. Hopefully, it helped the final version of the book. What I would be interested in is, I mean, you said you've been doing load testing for 20 years, or at least we have been in the space for 20 years. Brian and I, we've also been in the space for many, many years. We've been talking about performance engineering for a long, long time. And I think since I figured out how to write blog posts and maybe get something out on YouTube, we also started to educate people on the practices. Why did you still write a book? Why do you think there's still a need for a book like this? And then also, why do you think people should buy and look at your book? What's special about it? And who is the target audience?
Oh, wow. So many questions, but I'll be able to try to answer all of them in one answer. Yes. No. I mean, the reason for the book, to start with one of the questions, as for the few that do not know, I'm a consultant. And over these last years, I have been showing up with many customers that need performance testing services, specifically load testing services. And that's another topic, the differences in between performance and load testing. But often a situation that I walked into was to have to talk to management, have to talk even to testing teams about what we were about to do. Why did I needed to do some things? There were several technicalities. There were several C-level people that I had to explain what we were about to do. And I kept losing them, falling asleep, watching out over the window in the meeting room and waiting for the recess to start and be able to run out of there. And I had to come up with creative ways to engage the audience. Like, how can I explain it to someone that has never truly thought about systems performance? And I started to come up with examples and very, I was like a director. What how can I engage them? Hey, do you have a dog? Do you like puppies? Most of the people answer yes. So from there, I started to generate some fun examples, analogies, stories that would help me to explain to them what we were about to do. And from those examples, generally they were excited and like, finally, I got it. I know what you're going to do. And I got several times that aha moment. But several times, I had to repeat the same story several times till I said, like, why don't I write this up on one hand for people that are not in the trade and want to more or less understand what is going to happen. And at the same time, to give my coworkers that some may not be so creative with weird examples or relatable things that can be explained, or even for themselves to understand. I have found several colleagues that internally I wonder, like, do you really understand why we have to do this or that way? So that everyone can get a better approach. So I would say people foreign to the trade would have a blast reading the book, and people starting in the performance testing world would get a good understanding, some ideas, best practices. That's another one. And for seasoned performers, at least they will have fun. They will have some ways or examples to explain the trade. And hopefully, if they have some gaps, they will be able to identify them, polish them, and figure out some of the best practices. So,
yeah, I was just looking up the email that I wrote to you on, it was April 3rd, when I had this first chance to read through half of the book. And I want to confirm what you said, because I said it's a great enter and edu-taining read. Because it was really, as you said, you made it fun to read, the way you drafted it, the stories, the analogies. So I can really recommend, once it's out for everyone, check it out. I also agree with you. It's great for people that are kind of new to the trade and want to understand, why do we do all this? How do we do it? What's the purpose of it? And hopefully also for some of the seasoned ones, encourage them to also maybe, get into the mood of trying to educate people with what they have learned over the years, right? Hopefully you can also inspire more people to talk about their experiences.
Yeah, I remember too, as you were describing it, I remember it made me think about something, and I'm like, oh, that's right. That was part of my feedback to you, was that, I think a lot of people who go into performance get tossed into it, right? I had some training, I got taught by someone way back. Thanks, Maria. I know you're not in the business anymore, but thank you. But I was learning how to script, right? And then I was on my own. And every time I went to a job, I was like, oh, who else is the load testing here? Who do I talk to? Who do I coordinate with? Who do I learn from? They're like, you. I was like, so I had to figure it all out. And as I was reading your book, I'm like, holy cow, if I had this when I started, it would have been a whole different world. At one point I met Mark Tomlinson, and he gave me some pointers and tips and helped guide me a little bit. But it's always been, and I don't know if it's still that way. I imagine it probably is at a lot of places, because even though we all love to think performance is number one priority everywhere, right? I'm still sure it's a lot of, we still need to check that box. Let's grab this person. You do our load testing, right? And you got to figure it all out. So again, not to gush over your book so much, but I think for that getting started area, at least from that point of view, it's fantastic. And of course, I agree that it's a great way to help just even a seasoned person, like, explain. Like I always say, like, Andy, you had that whole bit of how do I explain what I do, and you did that whole slide deck with the camera, and like, how do you explain it to your parents? I think it was way back. And this book, in a similar way, is like, how do you explain to other people what this is so they can understand it? And so I think that's just really important.
And in a similar, on a line that you mentioned there, how most of us, I don't know a performance engineer that when they were a kid, like one said, I'm going to be a fireman, another, I'm going to be an astronaut, and I'm going to be a police, and the other, I'm going to be a performance engineer. No, most of us were just thrown at the trade and like, yeah, you're now a performer, figure it out. And in a bad practice as well, why I wanted to also write this book is because when most of us are thrown at performance and load testing, it's like, go there, script, and slam the system. Like, okay, what steps, and several bad practices that I saw or I experienced, and even myself, I did several times. The book has several personal learnings about how to improve what you are doing. And most of us that are thrown, we have no idea. We are just told, script all the functional test cases that you find in the test case repository. That was my initial, yes, sir. Your commandments are, your orders are my commandments, right? But then we learn, like, why am I automating functional scripts for load testing? Is that the best? And little bits and things like that I try to make sure that everybody understands. And again, even seasoned engineers I have found still doing that after several years. So I think
the whole topic of reusing functional tests, I think is actually something where we probably can get into controversial arguments, the two of us, because I think I replied to you in the email and said, we actually just had a couple of weeks prior to me reviewing the book, we had Roman Ferstel from Triscon also on the podcast, and he was actually talking and explaining how they found a way to kind of generate out of functional tests fully automatically some load tests and then running them. And I understand that we all have different backgrounds and different approaches to it, but I could see that this can be a controversial thing in your book. At least it inspired me to tell you that maybe some other people think differently, and that's also good, right? Because a book like this should also it's your experience, and it should spur some conversation.
No, and it's something where I give some explanations about that, because I think, functional tests, functional automations are very useful for performance in general, but probably I would do it differently if I'm doing the big and wide load tests, where if I don't have other route, well, that is the automations that I have. But as an example, as a synthetic continuous triggering, I love to have those functional tests to be happening here and there, and that we can get the metrics. But that's also part of the distinction that I try to do with the book. This is for load tests. And for the whole universe that is performance, I like to call it assurance, because you're not only doing testing, you're figuring out things, you're trying to polish, you're alerting, capturing events, all that we do in the general performance trade. But for load tests, in general, we want to trigger the process that is most important and generate the load. And it depends as well on the scenario. I'm with you. Functional tests, I'm not going to do negative functional automated tests in a load test, but maybe others may be very relevant and useful. So, and I repeat this in the book with like a good question always comes with the answer, it depends. And in performance, that applies like crazy.
I think what we've seen in many conversations, Andy and Leandro, we've had some of these before on Ask PerfBytes, is context is always important. And if you go into performance, let's just use the broad category of performance right now. I know we're more about load there, but if you use performance as a scientific field, if you will, right? It's about knowing what your different formulas are, what your different use cases, all the different conditions, and then matching those to what you need to do. And a lot of that is, I think you cover that in the book, but the idea of like, what is it that we're trying to achieve? What kind of a test am I running? Is this a performance test? Is it a load test? Is it a stress test? Is it a capacity test? Am I doing unit testing on microservices? Whatever that might be, you have to know what that is. And then you have to have that vocabulary, those tools, those formulas, if you will, to be able to execute what it is that you need. So all these things can be valid in the right use, but you need to know and learn what to use for what and understand what questions you're asking and how to find the answers to it. Because it really is a much broader practice, right? As we've said plenty of times before, a load test is a subset of performance, and there's a bunch of different variations on all those different things, but that's the continuing study. That to me is at least the exciting part about the entire performance field, is that it is so broad. There are so many different things you can tackle, and there's so many opportunities to learn different concepts and figure out how to apply them. And learning all those is the real fun part.
Hey, another question that came up, and I think, I believe at least Brian and I gave you some similar feedback on this. that the book is amazing to explain newcomers to the field why we're doing this, what this is all about. You are covering a lot of your own experience, but I think in the last couple of years, at least, we've moved to, let's say, new approaches to performance engineering and load testing, especially in the DevOps field. And I think you even said that you could probably write yet another book on kind of where the industry is heading and where some organizations are already heading. Is the book already? Do you have already planned it out, or what's happening next after this one?
So and this is something that I got some feedback, I got some questions, and personally, when I was done with the book, I was like, oh man. To give you some context, I started writing this book, let's say about 8 or so years ago, when those were the main practices that we didn't have that much agile, DevOps, continuous, any of those buzzwords or processes were even implemented. And it took me that long that, and I started to wonder, is this not relevant anymore? Should I just abort the book and start another one? But nowadays, we still have projects that are not agile-able or continuous, that you still need to do things in the waterfall way. On one hand, that's a few of the reasons why I kept going with this book. The other one is most of the performance engineers, as I said, are thrown at start scripting and do these things. And it's important that they understand some of the principles, why we do some things in certain ways, and be able to translate. And last, I think there are still several projects that even they have Scrum meetings, daily stand-ups, all this, but in essence, they are still waterfall. They have a big bang release, and they have to do this automation before release, and they just want to test for load. But that's a very good point, and it's more or less a closing that I do on the book, that agile methodologies almost mess and mix it up. Everything that is stated on that book is different. Most of it, I mean, not everything. There are several steps that you need to change your mindset about how you do performance testing. And it's ironic because lately my rant and motto has been performance testing is not only load testing, or they are not equal. And it's ironic that I just go and write a book about load testing. So, but yes, it is still relevant. I think most of the people still needs to learn and understand that. But that gave me that opening for the difference, how you should do performances, how you should think about performance in these agile continuous days. And it's in the works. I will do a similar explaining with fun examples, with lots of references, pop culture, and relatable things, so that people can correctly jump on the agile continuous wagon and start delivering, or even requesting to their teams, hey, why are we doing these things? I read that in the last book and they said that it's not so relevant anymore. Why aren't we with the new book? So yes, it's still relevant. It's still important for everyone to learn all what the book has, not just because I want to keep pushing the book, but it truly was a moment of personal doubt and questioning myself. Should I push for this? And I asked a few people, and they were like, yeah, that's still very, very relevant, and people still need to know it. But beware. There may be, I hope to not to take that many years, and that now the next methodology is over when I'm done with the next book. But and if things go well, it might be a trilogy about performance matters.
So you have so long, and thanks for all the tests.
Oh yeah, it's an endurance test for myself to keep pushing and writing. And
I was doing the next book in the I don't know if it's the next Hitchhiker book, but one of them. If it's going to be a Hitchhiker trilogy, it's got to be 4 books, though.
Oh, okay. We can push
a
it.
4-book trilogy. Yeah.
Performance at the end of the universe, would it be? And what would be the other ones?
So long, and thanks for all the tests. And I forget the last book.
So long, and thank you. Yeah, I forgot that one.
So obviously we want to encourage people to take a look at the book, and I want to ask you now a question. So you said you are, a consultant. You help a lot of organizations. You are brought in to do, performance engineering, performance testing, load testing. Based on your experience, why do you see performance projects still fail? Not those where you were involved, but why do you? What are the reasons why some of these projects fail in the end? And what is in the book that would prevent this if people would actually read the book? And obviously don't cover the whole book, but maybe you can highlight 2 or 3 things where you say, hey, I wish everybody would know this exactly. And if they only read 1 chapter out of the book or 2 chapters, this is what they should do. This is what they should read, because then this will lead to more successful projects.
Well, it made me think a lot. It's very kind of you to say that the projects that I'm involved in do not fail. That I would be lying if I agreed with that, because they at times probably wouldn't say fail, but they don't achieve the best outcomes that they could from our best practices. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's part of what I see as some of the issues that appear when the customer, the client, the organization is adamant about following some practices that as much, and I keep telling other testers, like, this is not the right approach. Again, we should not be automating, changing this drop-down box 10 times or typing text because that's functional. We should not automate some of those. We should not automate triggering batch jobs. Those are scheduled. They are already automated in a way. We can just ask someone, use your resources better. And some of those practices, I try to clarify and recommend, again, not only a manager, a C-level person, but the consultant to be able to say, hey, here's an example of why this is not the best practice, why this will not give you the best outcome, or will not provide any performance-related benefit to you. You are just testing, to quote a real-life example, you just want to have 5 billion users connected to the system, even as in reality you have 10. Why? Because there are 10 billion registered, but they are not active. They are not inside of the system. Why do you want to simulate that? You are not even making them do anything. And some other weird requests that we keep getting as from the customers. And I think that will give a lot of added value, because the customers that we manage to convince, to show why and what is the benefit of doing things the way that we recommend, or in general, that I would say is the best practice, will give them more benefit, more findings. Risk mitigation in the end is what we are trying to do. When they understand it, apply it, and see the results, see that we detected lots of things that, and to ring for what you guys are doing as well. When you understand that it's not everything automation and slamming the system, if you implement a good monitoring system, and if you get metrics from organics, if you get all this information, performance is not about only automating and slamming the system. And there's an area where I explain, like, hey, step 1, monitor. If you can put an APM, if you can put some tracing, telemetry, things that when you are doing other testing steps, functional, manual, even unit could be, you can get some of those metrics, and testing is different. So I think from experience and from what we see with organizations, ignorance and being adamant to, let's say, given ways of thinking or outdated processes or practices, I think is what is hurting a lot organizations, and what is making performance testing projects, if not to fail, probably, or I would better say, they don't get the best results that they could get from their efforts. And really, and most of the time with those customers, it's like, really, you don't want to do it that way. Really, this is the 5th time I explained to you, but in the end, you're the customer. You're paying for the service that we need to provide. Do you really want it? Put it on writing. CYA for me. You requested this, and we point out the risks. why you are not going to get the best results in this way, why we think. And here are the risks that you may still encounter. And I would say 9 out of 10 times that happens. And on a bright side, because we did all that due diligence, we get more business back. So, but I would say, and that's a big thing that I try to achieve with the book, that people understand and attach to best practices and get the best benefits from their testing efforts.
I will not quote you on that, but I think I wrote this down for my summary. Ignorance and outdated thinking are the 9 out of 10 reasons why load testing projects don't give you the results that you expect. Right? I mean, that's a very strong argument, and I think it's a very good one and a good reason for people buying a book.
I don't mind being quoted with that.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
I stand by it.
Yeah, that's perfect. So can you just quickly, the projects that you do, are these like a range of like very small companies to large enterprises, or is it typically large enterprises that bring you in, or how does that work in your line of work?
So, well, and again, it has been several, well, we can say decades. On this, we have gone from small, not too small, but medium small companies to S&P 500 size companies that have massive systems, massive people interacting. I could say one of the largest ones that I remember and had the most fun online video game that we had like 500,000 players playing against each other on a platform. Automations that had to have some, not AI, I would say, but some sort of intelligence that would play well against each other. And even systems that are homemade, that you have to figure out ways. So we get experience of all sort of customers and all sort of the ones that are like, yeah, this is waterfall. We need your process like that. We are, and I was about to do it. It's a podcast, quote unquote, agile or continuous, where we can tell them you are not yet, and here is why this process should change. And even some others that, as I mentioned earlier, they may be getting close to truly being agile and continuous, but they request us a waterfall performance test that we just want to know the response time from our system. Well, don't you have the metrics already? No, we need scripts for that. And sometimes my bosses are like, don't tell them. You don't need scripts for that. We don't need to create them. We can help you. We can configure a good APM, give you some metrics, some dashboards, alerting, so that you're aware of your performance. But, and you don't even have high utilization, too many customer users, and you'll be fine with just monitoring. You'll be fine implementing telemetry in the dev environment so that you know at the dev stage, and many other recommendations. But yeah, we go from projects from tiny till several thousands of users concurrently playing with the system.
How often do you test in production?
Depending on what type of test are you referring? Because my impulse is not as much as I would like to. Many users are still hooked up with that stigma that, oh no, you shall not touch production. You shall not pass over here. And many others are having those differences or misunderstandings. The times that I have been given pass to test in production is because there's no test environment that is sized similar to production where they can do a test. But they don't need a capacity test. They don't need a load test or a stress test. They just want to know the performance and to be accurate-ish, I would say. And that's another one where I'm like, you are not concerned. You just want to measure response time under not even a stressful load or a production load. You can use here your test environment. You just need to capture the problem areas. You need to filter out. But and in the other hand, in production environments, I would like to do some load tests on most of those environments. And many of others, I highly recommend to the customer, hey, you have a decent, blue-green process. Why don't you, instead of asking me, and again, some of my bosses, is like, hey, that was, no, I wouldn't say good business, that was business. But I'm like, that's not the best practice. The best practice, like, make your users do the testing. Release one version, have a parallel production environment, measure that, do the performance and load test. Because that's, I think that's another urban legend that is not true anymore. Load testing doesn't necessarily has to be automated anymore. You can have beta testing groups. You can have, what was the name of canaries? You can.
So basically what you mean, you don't need a testing tool to generate synthetic load. You can, in some cases already, if the architecture allows it, use real user traffic to do your performance testing and load testing. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the times, and some of those recommendations with some customers, when we come up and tell them that, they're like, "What? Why I shouldn't automate? I already bought the tools. I already have this." And on the other hand, that's where, like, wait, I didn't say to skip completely the tools. You can still create some good scripts that will not load test. You can have them as synthetics. Let them trigger every hour, every day, every 30 minutes, and get a measurement. Make sure that you analyze if there's a deviation that concerns you, that you have any concern. Lots of these shifting right methodologies for performance, which as well is part of the trilogy, or I don't know, quadrilogy, how to say it, that I'm planning or thinking on doing, because many of those, I don't know how to segment, and that's a good point. The switch left, switch right, shift, sorry, I keep switching, pun intended. Those terms, it's important, it's part of the new and recent methodologies, and is something that many organizations need to loosen up, get rid of the fear, and because on most situations, don't take it and run it and say that I said this. If you don't have good release practices, probably you should not be testing in production. But most of the time, if you did your due diligence, please start doing it.
Yeah, besides just the general user traffic in production, as we were discussing a few episodes ago, who was it, Andy, who was talking about you're not load testing unless you're testing in production?
Hasse Welstra. He was basically saying shift left is a lie.
Yeah, and, we came out to the idea that there's shift left cases, which is more performance based. Load is a bit more production based. But to your point, you can have your real user productions, but when you have those tools, you can use that then in your production environment to test above your current traffic levels. Like, what's your capacity? What can you ramp up to? If you're going to have a sale or whatever, and you're going to add 20% users, well, that's where you do that. But having your base users in the system at the time is phenomenal. Is it a phenomenal environment to test it in?
Yeah, and he also made a great point that he said this is a great way to make people think about SLOs, because basically you have a certain expectation that the system, even under 20% more load, behaves in a certain way, right? And then you need to think of, well, what is the expected way? Well, let's define an SLO, whether it's on a response time, on a failure rate, on throughput, whatever it is, and then define it in production, then add additional load on it and see if the system still behaves within the SLOs, even under higher than normal load conditions, which can happen, right? If some, as you said, like a flash sale happens or something, whatever, who knows?
But as you say, those are very specific scenarios that you want to figure out, that you want to filter out. And that's another thing that I tried to make a point in the book as much as I could. There's no silver bullet in performance and load testing. It's not a single test. If you have this risk scenario, test for it and figure out a way to trigger it. If you have that other, do it another way. Put your system upside down and see if just that microservice blows out, or if the whole ecosystem will have issues. There are several mixes. Don't think anymore that is I run a load test and that's it. I figure out everything. I keep saying it's like every load test or performance test in general is like looking for a needle in a haystack. That bottleneck becomes the needle. And if you try to do too much at once, you have several haystacks and you're trying to find those needles on there. And keeping a little bit with those analogies, the performance testing area, the whole universe of performance testing is like medicine. But for you to be healthy, you don't just go with the dermatologist, to give an example. You also have to go to the dentist, you have to go with the orthopedist, and if you have severe issues, you go to the specialist on those different areas. Same with performance testing. You don't just do a load test here, you just don't do switch right, you don't just do switch left. My recommendation would be try to implement as much of those practices as you can or is relevant, because there are some others that also should not apply to your particular circumstance. As Brian said, context, super important.
Yeah. That comes back even to, hey, we want to go to Kubernetes. Well, why? Right? We want to do a load test. Why? Everything is always about context. Right? Mm-hmm. What is it? What's the goal? Once you can define your goal, no matter what it is, if you're moving to a new technology, if you want to develop a feature in a certain way, if you want to do some sort of testing, what is the goal of that? And then you can design what you need to based upon that.
Yeah. But isn't it because you heard it at the barbecue over the weekend?
Because you were listening to PerfBytes and said, "Hey, I have to test it this way."
and you said it a little bit joking, but that's why I said don't take me fully on those recommendations, because they depend a lot. There are things that you absolutely need at times, and some other organizations or some other projects that you yourself may have are not needed there. So.
That's also why we have the disclaimer in the beginning of the podcast. Listening to this podcast will not automatically lead to better performance. This is something we should have.
All I have to do is listen. If you just listen, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
Probably better understanding of performance, but it won't improve automatically. And like those stock market podcasts, like everything you hear here is not a professional advice. You should touch base with your personal performance consultant or advisor, and so on. Yeah.
Good. So, Leandro, to kind of your final pitch for people to buy the book. What's your final pitch? This is the reason why.
If they had $5 left in their entire life, why should they spend it on your book instead of food or anything else?
So to start, I'm not sure if it's going to be $5. We're still working that out. In that point, to be honest, I'm trying to keep it the lowest possible, just having a marginal profit. I just really want that knowledge with most of the people. Mm-hmm. And if they can, I hope that the book will give them a good journey. It's an experience to read it. I hope it is fun, that you get a good time, that you get engaged reading all the stories, all the analogies, all the examples that I try to give. And in the end, hopefully, even if you want it or not, you'll end up understanding at least half of those practices, why they matter, why they are important, and you'll be able to explain them. I think that's why you should pay attention to the book, why you should pick it up, give it a try. It might sound self-indulging, but I almost guarantee it's going to be fun. You're going to enjoy it, at least smile here and there, or at the minimum, like Brian told me when he was reviewing it, you will know what is a chancla and why it is dangerous from Mexican culture.
I forgot about that one. What was that? Oh, don't answer it, because you got to read the book.
You
got to read the book. You got to read the book. No, and I really appreciate the way you handled. You wrote it a combination of fun anecdote, and then you went into, after that was done, you would go ahead and explain everything behind it. Because what I found, similar book, right, in a way, the Phoenix Project, where they wanted to talk about this idea that's very, very important, but they did it through this fictionalized story so that you can understand it. Now, the one thing that was missing from that was they, for better or for worse, I mean, I thought it was a fine book and it communicated the ideas, but they never took the time then to take and explain those in detail from a technical point of view as an aside to the story. I guess they did that in follow books, and there's all whole other
think
practice to it.
Yeah.
But that's what I like. In yours, you have both there. You tell the anecdote, and then you explain then the technical side, which gives you both bits of context.
And that's a very good point, because I think it's the DevOps handbook where they try to land the technicalities of what the Phoenix project was trying to explain. Gene and all the guys, even the Unicorn project expands a little bit, trying to give a few more explanations there. And it's something that I was way more than half over the book when I read the Phoenix, the Unicorn, and the DevOps handbook. And I was like, this is something that, warning for them, I am going to shamelessly try to imitate that. I think it's also worth to tell a story around a performance testing project where you can add all these little variations, examples, how a performance person should try to tackle those. That's where I was saying probably, because that's a challenge. You need to be also a very good storyteller to put together something that is engaging and you can relate. But I think mostly on the you can relate, a little bit like The Office or a Dilbert comic, when everyone says like, yeah, I had a pointy hair boss that asked me these ridiculous things, and you'll see why that happens. And I don't know, water tank stories or things like that. I love that explanation, and hopefully I'll be able to push some stories for that. But for now, enjoy the examples, enjoy the fun. It's like a video game. You move on level by level, little by little, and you'll be doing progress with the book.
Awesome.
Thank you, Leandro. Not for your primera vez, I think for your segundo vez, and hopefully not for your... what's the last time? Ultima vez. Yeah, I'm sure you will be back on more stories, especially because you have a lot of experience, field experience, hands-on experience, and I'm pretty sure we should figure out what other topics that you deal with in a day-to-day life we should bring to our audience here. Especially also as our profession is changing and merging with other fields. I think that would be great. Make sure that you are sending over some of the links to your other, YouTube channels, as you mentioned. Especially the content in Spanish would be great. We'll then do a write-up, and folks that are listening in, check out all the links in the summary. Brian, what is last final words from you?
I want to commend you on your background, Leandro. I've seen it change several times. You've got your studio set up really nice, and is that the only nice looking part of your room? I forget. I remember sometimes there'd be the pan and there's all the other gear and the equipment and all. It's very studio. So for people, and I bring this up because people who should check out Leandro on YouTube, because he does a really phenomenal video production. When he does it, it's really inspiring. And in fact, I've got my old DSLR camera hooked up here with a bad frontal light, so I have a shiny face, which I'm looking at Leandro. I'm like, he's probably got side lights. Anyhow, this is completely off topic, but you'll see it all in the picture if you look at the picture that we post with this. Anyway, thank you for being on. I did not practice a wrap-up in Espanol, so I'll just have to do it. I'm going to we'll keep pressing one for English. And say thank you. If anybody has any questions, comments, please contact us at pure_dt@dynatrace.com, or you can tweet us at, it's pure_dt at Twitter, or pureperformance@dynatrace.com for email. See, I messed that up, Andy. Andy's going to beat me later for that. Thank you so much, Leandro. It's been a pleasure. I haven't talked to you in a while, so it's great to talk to you a while. Wish you the best of luck with the book, and hopefully it'll be out soon. If not, I know who to pester. In fact, should we give out their email and tell everyone to get the book out? I'm kidding. Let's dox them. Let's dox them and tell them to.
Yeah, for now we have and this is a small announcement. It's going to be published through PerfBytes Press,
Yes.
and we're going to have an email for any question, comments related to the book. But in the meantime, anyone can find me on all the social networks as Leandro Melendez or as Señor Performo. Specifically, as you mentioned, in YouTube, there are two channels. One that ends up in ENG for English, and no post something is Spanish. As you mentioned, we're trying to keep up the video production, make everything sound, look, and especially the content to be fun, engaging, and happy, as I hope the book will be. So, guys, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Muchas gracias. Los quiero. Besos. Adiós.
Adiós.
Adiós. Gracias. Muchas gracias.